Missile strikes between Israel and Iran are intensifying as both sides target key military and nuclear sites. So could President Trump's call for Iran's unconditional surrender push the U.S. into direct conflict? I'm Veronica Dudo. Let's find out.
This is In America Today from the Ticker News Studios in New York City.
Tensions are rapidly escalating in the Middle East as Israel and Iran continue to launch strikes. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed retaliation for an Iranian ballistic missile strike on an Israeli hospital. Meanwhile, the IDF says Israel launched 20 jets on a mission to western Iran to destroy Iranian missile batteries and other military targets. In Washington, President Donald Trump has called for Iran's unconditional surrender and hinted at the possibility of U.S. military involvement.
Well, I don't want to get involved either, but I've been saying for 20 years, maybe longer, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time. And I think they were a few weeks away from having one. And they had to sign a document. I think they wish they signed it now. It was a fair deal. And now it's a harder thing to sign, you know. It's a lot of water over the dam. But, you know, it's I say it very simply. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Too much devastation. And they'd use it. You know, I believe they'd use it. Others won't use it, but I believe they'd use it. So that's it. It's very simple as far as I'm concerned. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
For more, I'm joined by Alex Traiman, the CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So first, let's begin with the hospital strike. Do we know anything more from on the ground after this occurrence?
Well, there's been over 450 ballistic missiles launched at Israel since this conflict expanded on Friday. We're now in day 6. And this was one of the largest barrages in the last several days, where we had several dozen missiles and more than one of them actually touched down, hit the ground. Israel tries to intercept as many of them as they can. One hit a residential neighborhood, took out like an entire building and some buildings around it in Ramat Gan near Tel Aviv. And this one that you mentioned hits the hospital, one of Israel's best and biggest hospitals in Beersheba in the south. And fortunately, for whatever reason, the health ministry had evacuated one of the floors from this old surgery building in the hospital just the day before. And had they not done that, I'm sure that many, many more people would have been killed. But there were dozens of people wounded in the attack.
What is significant with Israel striking the enrichment sites in the current phase of this conflict?
Well, we saw today that Israel struck the Arak heavy water facility, which is a nuclear facility. And you could see the difference between the Israeli attacks and the Iranian attacks. The Israeli attacks are specifically targeted. They're precision targeted. They're hitting exactly the military targets that they want to hit. And Iran is basically just pelting ballistic missiles, including intercontinental ballistic missiles, at Israeli population centers. Maybe they say that they have military targets, but there's really no indication right now on the basis of where all these missiles are being intercepted or are getting through the interceptors and hitting, that they're just, most of them landing in residential neighborhoods. So we see the difference between Israeli strikes and the Iranian counterattacks.
Do you believe President Trump is seriously considering military intervention, or is this more strategic posturing?
I think that they're definitely considering it seriously. I believe that from the outset of this extended conflict that the United States was considering that it could enter the conflict, particularly when it comes to the deep underground facilities of the Fordo nuclear reactor, which is deep under a mountain. It would be very difficult for Israel to hit that without the types of munitions that only the United States really has. And the other underground facility is the one that's housing the Ayatollah Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Defense Minister Israel Katz said today that Khamenei is now a goal, to prevent his existence is now a goal of Israel during this conflict, in addition to neutralizing the nuclear threat and neutralizing the ballistic missile threat. A question as to whether the president will act to aid Israel even further than it's done until now by actively targeting Fordo or some of the other sites. Certainly, they can do it a lot faster than Israel can do it.
As you mentioned, talking about that elimination, how would a targeted assassination of the Ayatollah potentially alter the regional balance of power?
I think it would completely shift the regional balance of power. If the regime is gone, and that only happens when the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is taken out, and also his son, who is the chosen successor to Khamenei, who's 86, will be taken out. That will open the door for Iranians to take back their country, and they do have a revolutionary history. And we saw it before this Islamic Republic that took charge in 1979. That the Shah was a modernizing, secularizing, pro-Western force in Iran, and there's a great hope that that Iran could even come back into the American orbit, the pro-Western orbit, and even potentially sign a normalization deal with Israel. The Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, has stated over and over again to the Iranian people that Israel has no qualms or is not an enemy of the Iranian people, rather is only an enemy of this regime that chants death to Israel and develops the ballistic missiles and the nuclear missiles, weapons rather, that could see Israel wiped off the map.
What are the possible global ramifications if the U.S. enters this conflict militarily?
Well, we don't really know, and that's, I think, what the president is trying to weigh right now. We've already seen, for example, that China has landed planes in Iran since this conflict. That's been reported. Iran is really in this axis of China and Russia, and certainly now Iran is being removed from this axis. If China or Russia want to protect their now almost fallen Axis member, it could be that the conflict will expand. That's certainly something that the president will hope to avoid. Right now, the conflict seems localized to Israel and Iran. The president doesn't really want to see American targets be hit by Iran in retaliation. So these are the things that he's weighing before deciding whether or not to join the attack.
Now, of course, we have been seeing the exchange of missiles back and forth between the two nations. What is it like on the ground for Israelis who are currently, living this reality?
Well, it's a surreal reality, surreal for Israelis right now. And Israelis are really the most resilient people, I think, in the entire world. It's not only the ballistic missiles of the last week. Israel's really received or been on the receiving end of over 50,000 rockets, Qassam rockets, Katyusha rockets, both from Gaza, from southern Lebanon, ballistic missiles from Yemen over the last 600 days, and now ballistic missiles. Certainly the intensity of these latest barrages is greater than anything Israel's experienced over this last 600-day war. And Israelis are basically forced into bomb shelters every several hours. I mean, we do have good technology here that monitors when missiles are attacked. They're able to know that missiles have been attacked towards Israel and give essentially a 10-minute warning. We get that through the phone. We get a hard push notification that you can't turn off, and then you know that you have to get near a shelter. And from that point, then technology is trying to figure out exactly where these ballistic missiles are targeting in the country, and based on where they believe that the missiles are headed specifically, then you get air raid sirens and also notifications on the app to move from near the protected area to into the protected area. From that point, you have about 90 seconds to get into a shelter. So Israelis have just been bouncing in and out of shelters for the last 7 days and hoping that there won't be a direct hit, because even if there's a direct hit, even if you're in a shelter and your shelter gets hit with a 1 ton or greater ballistic missile, there's probably very little that your shelter is going to be able to do to save you.
What's the likelihood that the actions currently taken by Israel and Iran now could potentially trigger a broader regional war?
Well, certainly, I guess the hope for the United States and for other countries in the Middle East is that it doesn't spill over. But if the Iranian regime feels that they are on their last legs, that they are no longer going to survive past this, who knows what they could do? They may have a suicidal mentality, which says if we're going down, you're all going down with us. So, we don't know what Iran has in their arsenal. We've seen ballistic missiles, we've seen intercontinental ballistic missiles, and larger ones, and ones that can seemingly avoid some of the Israeli interceptors. But we don't know if Iran has it in their capabilities to launch a biological weapon, a chemical weapon, potentially a dirty bomb using the 60% enriched uranium that they already have. And we don't know whether they would fire that only at Israel, if they might fire those at other countries in the region, either in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, or whether they would potentially target American installations either in Iraq or potentially in the sea, where you have a number of the United States naval vessels patrolling the area.
Alex Trayman, stay safe, and thank you so much for your insights on this issue.
Thanks for having me.
This is Ticker. We'll be right back.